Yeah, it's a beautiful morning, a little after 7 o'clock a.m. Temperature 28 degrees with sleet and some big snowflakes coming down. Now, I do drive for a local school district about 15 miles south of here, and I got about 10 miles into that trip when I found out that school is 2 hours late. So I got to experience the slickery roads. I mean, they're slick. You got to be careful for sure. And we do have the 2 hour delay, and you can see even the concrete slab where we park here with the sleet especially and the snow. It is a little slick. So we'll try it again in an hour and a half and see how things are. I don't think they'll cancel school today, so I'll probably be working a little bit later. But in the meantime, I wanted to crank out a weather forecast for you. Yesterday, my hard drive was full on my Mac and it wouldn't let me record. So I think I've resolved that. And now that I have the extra time this morning, I can get you a forecast today because it looks pretty dangerous in the south today with not just heavy rain, but isolated severe storms, some very big hail with that, and a possibility of some tornadoes too. So let's throw it back inside where I'm sure a lot warmer here in a few minutes, and I'll have the rest of your forecast. Mike, now to you in the studio.
All right, thanks, Mike. You kind of broke the cardinal rule of live reporting. You forgot to mention where you are. So here in western Iowa, as we're having sleet and snow this morning, 28 degrees, wind chill 15. Anyway, it's cold out there. And the roads are a little bit icy, so we do have that late start, as I mentioned earlier, in that live report. Meanwhile, we do have tornado threat across the southeast today, and some very heavy thunderstorms too with some rain. It's going to be a mess down there. And meanwhile, our snow in Nebraska, Iowa, moving off to the east as well. So a touch of winter, I suppose. It's not terrible out there, but it is a little bit icy. Here are your watches and warnings across the area. We do have winter weather advisories for central Nebraska into northwest Kansas and a little bit of eastern Colorado, and of course in the mountains in Colorado, Wyoming, and northern New Mexico. There you see our flooding threat across the southeast, moving into South Carolina and a little bit of North Carolina. This also comes with a threat for large hail and even some tornadoes today. Down in Florida, it's dense fog. Down in Texas, South Texas, red flag warnings there. Dry, warm, and dry and windy. Those things. And then for the Pacific Northwest, a little bit of wind issues there as well. Here is your severe weather threat today. So East Texas through Louisiana, southern Mississippi, southern Alabama, a little bit of the Florida Panhandle. This is your slight risk for severe weather. So yes, there will be heavy rain. There may be large hail. There may be strong damaging winds. And there may be isolated tornadoes. The brown is your 5% risk. The green is your 2% risk. So do keep an eye out. If you live in this area, you know what to do. Stay close to wherever you get your warnings from and keep an eye to the sky. So be safe out there today. Surface for today looks like this. The cold front and the colder air moving through the Midwest all the way down through the southern plains. Behind that, we do see that mix of precipitation all the way from Michigan through Wisconsin, Iowa, Kansas, into the Texas Panhandle, and eastern New Mexico, and along the spine of the Sacramentos even, into Arizona. Behind that, it's snow for Nebraska, Colorado, northern New Mexico, and it's heavy snow parts of Wyoming and Colorado. Ahead of all this, we have a warm front moving through the south, and behind the warm front, it's very soupy air as well, very high dew points, lots of rain. Flooding possible, again, the severe threat possible that we've already mentioned, and then general thunderstorms all around that. All right, the highs today confined mainly to the south and, parts of Texas 70s and 80s in the red area. Same for Florida, more 70s as you get into the south, but dew points also in the mid 60s to near 70, so just very soupy air. That's why we're expecting all that rain and that severe weather threat. But you get north of the front, obviously temperatures drop off. 40s Iowa this afternoon, 30s for Nebraska, 40s South Dakota, and then of course hanging into the 20s there in northern North Dakota. But even the Northeast on the warm side with 50s, a lot of 50s in the Northeast, some 40s as you get into Boston and into Maine. And for the West Coast, we're looking at 50s for the Pacific Northwest, and that warms up as you head south into California. Severe weather for tomorrow. So everything's going to shift eastward. So our threat is northern Florida into Georgia, South Carolina, a little bit of North Carolina, and parts of Alabama. So this is where you have the greatest risk for, some damaging wind and large hail. And yes, isolated tornadoes, a 5% risk in that brown area. It's a pretty large area, and around that a 2% risk. So if you live in this area, I would say starting tonight into tomorrow, because some of this severe weather can last overnight. We're expecting even maybe lines of storms with some bow echoes that may have some 80-mile-an-hour winds associated with them. So if you have a NOAA weather radio, make sure you have that near your bed in case there's any warnings in the middle of the night. And keep an eye out if you live in this area or visiting even. All right. The surface for tomorrow also reflects that, where the severe weather is possible, even the heavy rain too in North Carolina, South Carolina. Thunderstorms around that, and then further north, the mixture moves into the Ohio Valley and parts of the Northeast, and into Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine, even some freezing rain possible. A little pocket of snow for western New Mexico, eastern Arizona. That's interesting. And then up in the Pacific Northwest, our next system, bringing a chance of thunderstorms for the Oregon and Washington coast. That's a little unusual. And a mixture as you get inland, and even some heavy snow for parts of southern Oregon into northern California. Tomorrow's highs, that cold front making progress eastward, so not as warm for the Ohio Valley and even the Northeast. Northeast now highs in the 40s mostly. A few 50s hanging in there for Ohio, and then the warm air further south. The winter is Florida with 80s, but you see some 70s to near 80 even in southern Arizona and southern Texas. But even West Texas, mid 50s. Still cool in the Midwest. 40s to near 50 for highs, and then way up in northern North Dakota, instead of 20s, you have a high of 32, so a little bit warmer. And the surface for Sunday as we round out the weekend, you see snow, Michigan, northern Ohio into Pennsylvania, heavy snow off the lakes, in New York and Pennsylvania, and up in Maine, with a mixture around that, maybe even some freezing rain possible for parts of Maine. Our Pacific Northwest storm moving further inland, heavy snow possible for Northern California into the Sierra Nevada. Of course, epic snowpack this year in those mountains. That is really good news as we get into summer, as we will get into summer. Thunderstorms still for the Oregon and Washington coast. Again, that's kind of unusual. And I almost missed this, but heavy snow for the Olympic Mountains on the Olympic Peninsula there in northwestern Washington, and some heavy snow in the northern part of Idaho. How about that? All right, let's check out the European model. This is going to get us through the weekend into Monday. And we're starting out here at 6 o'clock this morning. So this is an hour and a half ago. And you see our snow here in western Iowa. I live about here, and I'm looking out the window right now. Looks like we're a little bit of a lull, maybe some sleet happening right now. But so yeah, it's been snowing this morning with some sleet. Same for parts of Nebraska. Out ahead of the cold front, it's rain. Kind of a chilly rain though for Iowa, and then into Illinois. And then those turn into thunderstorms. Some of these have been heavy storms, heavy rain, severe weather possible. And then up in the northwest, we see the hints of our next storm coming in. So let's move forward in time, and we'll see how all this plays out. You see our snow coming to an end in western Iowa. This would be noon today, so 5 hours from now, just a little bit of light snow left. It's rain, a shield of rain for Chicago. And then here are your heavy showers and storms. Louisiana getting soaked, Mississippi getting soaked. And again, some of these could be severe, damaging winds a possibility, hail a possibility, and isolated tornadoes a possibility. So stay weather aware if you live in these areas. That heavy rain continues in the southeast, again with isolated severe. We've got this big shield of rain for Michigan, Indiana, moving into Ohio, lingering in Illinois. And this is kind of the only game in town right here. This would be tonight, Friday night. And as we go 3 hours at a time, this gets us to midnight Friday. And we see our area of heavy rain and possible severe weather persists in the overnight hours. So again, if you live in the south, if you live in this area, make sure you have a way to get those warnings overnight while you're sleeping, because it could get a little bit rough. And we see a cluster here of some strong storms south of Bowling Green and north of Nashville. So keep an eye out here. Of course, this is a computer model. The exact location of something like this is not yet known because it's the future. That's the computer model doing its best. So it could be anywhere in this area. Watch out for an area of strong storms as well. And then we see a little bit of a mix here in Michigan. Again, this is midnight Friday night, so this is overnight hours. And as we get into the day on Saturday, this is Saturday morning, 6-9 Central Time, we see the heavy rain, isolated severe, isolated tornadoes, and for North Carolina, South Carolina, trailing into Georgia and Florida. So this is the area to watch out for. Our Pacific Northwest storm now moving on shore Saturday morning. That's rain on the coast. Some pretty good snows, southern Oregon, northern California mountains. We see a big area of rain with our low here moving into Pennsylvania, West Virginia, New York. Some of that coming down is freezing rain and snow in eastern New York, and that'll be moving into Massachusetts, Connecticut, with some thunderstorms and heavy rainfall for New Jersey into Connecticut, Long Island, near New York City, changing to snow as you head upstate, and also into Vermont. A little bit of snow inland in the Pacific Northwest, and another area of rain, and you see these isobars very close together. This is some windy rain moving onshore in the Pacific Northwest as we get, this is midnight Saturday, Eastern or Central Time, so 1 a.m. Eastern. Just a big mess in New England. Rain, snow, heavy rain, rumble of thunder, maybe some ice. Pacific Northwest, some wind and some rain moving onshore. And a mess in the east progresses northward as we get into the day Sunday. This is 7 a.m. Eastern Time, and this is, well, we've had the time change, right? So we spring forward. So this is 6 a.m. Eastern, and that would be 3 a.m. for the Pacific Northwest as these showers and thunderstorms moving onto the Oregon and Washington coast, and some wind associated with that. Very windy in New England as well, with cold air coming in behind the low. You see freezing temperatures or very cold temperatures all the way through Virginia with that cold front entering North Carolina. And as the low lifts northward, the cold air presses southward. Meanwhile, the Pacific Northwest, the heavy rain and snow in Northern California is moving a little bit southward, but you still see scattered showers and storms for the Oregon and Washington coast as we get later in the day on Sunday. This now moves us towards Monday. We're almost to Monday here. This is midnight Central Time, Sunday night, although I'm off by an hour because we spring forward. I have to do the math. This might be 1 a.m. Central. This might be midnight Mountain Time. But again, still a lot of cold wind and lake effect snow for New York State. Some snows in Vermont, New Hampshire as well, down into, a few snow showers, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and that cold air moving into South Carolina. So it's going to be cold on the backside of this storm. Warm air into the middle of the country, and then it's cold with this Pacific Northwest storm as we go into the day on Monday. All right, pretty exciting weekend ahead. Again, if you're in the Southeast, please keep an eye on the weather and be careful. All right, here are your trends for the 15th through the 21st, so the third week of March looking like this, including St. Patrick's Day. It's wetter than normal along the south, basically, and especially the southeast, especially Louisiana, and then right up the east coast. And we've seen why, at least for the next week. And then looks like that trend will continue. Meanwhile, drying out in the Midwest, that is bad news. Also for the Central Plains, we really need the moisture. And then drying out in the West, where they could probably use a drying out in the West. Temperature-wise, the warmest temperatures out west, and the best chances for above average temperatures. Above average temperatures being pressed further north, so some of that cooler air now for southern New Mexico into Texas, and equal chances of above or below average temperatures for a lot of the Midwest and into the South. It looks like warmer than average up into New England and the mid-Atlantic states as we get into the third week of March. All right, that's my report from snowy and sleety western Iowa. I'm going to see if school's still on for 2 hours late. I think so. So I better get to work here. You have a great rest of your day. And Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, we'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, The Weather Mike.